anytime you're holding what this guidance defines as a crypto asset, so this excludes NFTs, I will caveat with that. For any crypto assets held on the balance sheet, recorded at fair value. So as of the date of my, the end of the quarter, I should say what is the price and what is the quantity of my Bitcoin held. And that is the number that I will record on my balance sheet.
This content is brought to you by Uphold, which is one of the top crypto platforms out there, which allows you to easily buy, sell, trade Bitcoin and the top altcoins in the market. Uphold lists 260 plus cryptocurrencies. They also allow you to trade precious metals such as gold, silver, palladium, and platinum. I've been a user of Uphold since 2018, so I can vouch for this platform. They have full transparency reports, and they don't commingle or lend out your funds. They also have a great product called Vault, which is an assisted self-custody product. Vault allows you to maintain custody of your funds, and the keys are split. So Uphold holds one and you hold two. And if there's any issues, if you lose one of your keys, Uphold will help restore these keys and you can maintain access to your funds. It's 24/7 instant trading. It's trustless. So this is a great feature that can give you peace of mind where you don't have to worry about if you lose your private keys and much more. So if you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and with me is Reagan Cook, who is the accounting subject matter expert at TaxBit. Reagan, great to have you back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Reagan, I have interviewed folks on from TaxBit over the years, and we've talked a lot about what TaxBit has been doing to help different companies and even retail investors in the crypto industry. So definitely want to hear the latest updates, but also get your take on things like what the IRS is doing and the FASB rules and so forth around companies holding Bitcoin and so forth. But let's start with your background. Where are you from and what's your professional background?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm from Indiana. I grew up a Hoosier, went to Indiana University. I'm a CPA by trade. I started my career at Deloitte, spent some time at a large public company thereafter, doing all things internal and external reporting. I had a personal interest in crypto and moved out west and found TaxBit, which was a perfect combination of that professional background in financial reporting and CPA, but also paired with personal interest of crypto and blockchain technology.
So what sparked your personal interest? What was your first encounter and what was your aha moment?
My aha moment was really understanding and watching a bunch of YouTube about blockchain technology. This had to be about 10 years ago, actually. I started watching a bunch of YouTube, reading about blockchain technology, understanding some of the efficiencies and utility there. So that was actually the inception of the interest. And then, of course, there was a ton of activity going on with Bitcoin. I started hearing about people mining Bitcoin. I'm also a freelance artist, and so the NFT space was particularly interesting for me. And the thought of the use cases just it piqued my interest, and it's cool. It's exciting to see how the industry has evolved since then, and it will continue to evolve. And it's just fascinating to see companies like PayPal and Visa and even Nike a few years back exploring the NFT space. It's evolving and it will continue to evolve, but it's just fascinating to see these use cases start to actually play out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And what many would call now Web3, the transition from Web 1 to 2.0, of course, and now a entirely different world where users kind of have more ownership and the ability to do a lot more. Now, for those who may not know about TaxBit, give us an overview of your services.
Yeah. So TaxBit's mission is to enable the digital economy. And that's a broad statement, but I start there with that broad statement because TaxBit has built modernized solutions for tax, accounting, and also public sector. So if let's drill into each of those really quickly here. Accounting, when I say accounting, I'm referring to accounting and financial reporting and all of the tracking that needs to happen for the individual transactions to do that consolidated financial reporting, whether you're a public or a private company. And along with that is the concept of journal entries. So if you think about legacy ERP solutions, NetSuite, QuickBooks, some of these solutions that have been around for a long time that most companies use, regardless of their size, they don't historically support digital assets. And so there's a need for this external solution because it's putting accountants and finance experts back in spreadsheets completely. So these experts in their roles as a controller or a CFO or their respective teams, they've taken steps back and are now doing everything in spreadsheets. And so there's a need for either the existing ERP solutions or solutions like ours to enable companies to continue to explore the digital asset space and be efficient while doing it from a back office perspective. And that also relates to our tax solutions. So if you think about the recent, regulation clarity that we're seeing, it's the same concept. There's a ton of underlying transaction data that companies need to track and record in a timely manner to comply with this regulatory clarity that we're just now starting to see. And then finally, we have a public sector side of the house. So we build solutions for government agencies to do the same exact thing. So we're enabling, whatever groups of people, enterprises, government agencies, to do their tax and accounting and whatever their respective reporting requirements are in a more, efficient manner.
So speaking of government agencies, of course, the IRS is the agency where everybody's focused on and what activities they have going on, what initiatives. How have you been engaging with them, and are there any interesting takeaways?
Yeah, in terms of the IRS, so I'll speak high level here.
Yeah.
We have been working close with the IRS. We have a contract with the IRS, more from a thought leadership perspective, and we're enabling the IRS and other government agencies with solutions so that they can understand the space better and make informed decisions for the broader population.
Yeah, that's really great because I know there's been a lot of rumblings in the industry from people saying these government agencies don't get it, right? And
Yeah.
we need education and advocacy. So it's great that you guys are engaging and helping them along the way because there's been things like the 1099 DA form, I believe, issued by the IRS with the industry saying, hey, it's not doable.
Yep.
Yeah. So any thoughts on that form and how the industry has been engaging?
No, I mean, whether it's that form or, an accounting topic or other forms that have been discussed, it's a matter of educating the decision makers and helping them understand so that we can create realistic and actually useful requirements for companies and individuals. So that's where I do believe there's been a ton of interesting conversation. And, I'm extremely passionate about what TaxBit is doing because I was on a call yesterday where we were having conversations with someone at a large exchange, and it was simply a thought leadership conversation that happened after the Bitcoin Nashville conference. And it's funny, they were referring to this conversation as extracurricular work. You have your work that you're doing at your respective company, and it's really cool to see all these individuals come together outside of their direct roles and responsibilities at their companies coming together and, partnering and wanting to learn with each other about what should the regulation be? What should the guidance be for accounting? What is realistic for individual taxpayers and also companies wanting to explore and grow in the digital asset space? So we are so actively involved in these conversations on a weekly basis, and that's certainly one element of what keeps me extremely energized and also excited about the future for the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as with you, you guys doing your advocacy and education, the industry continuing to give feedback, we can get this right, and the governments, different government agencies can get these things right. I did want to ask you about the FASB rules, which are enforceable starting December 31st, 2024. And this is part of a bigger conversation of companies adding Bitcoin to their treasury, and using it as a treasury reserve asset. Tell us about this rule. And I believe from what I've read, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this is positive because it allows companies to easily add Bitcoin to their balance sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had asked me 3 years ago if I would get fired up about accounting guidance, I would have said no. But there is one thing that I do get very excited about in the realm of accounting guidance, and it is this specific topic because previous to this accounting guidance update, the guidance and requirement for companies, I'll just simplify here. The previous guidance here, if you were holding Bitcoin and you bought it for $50,000, let's say, and the price dropped to 20,000 and then it went back up to 60,000, you were required as a company to record that initial any loss that occurred. So anytime the price dropped below that initial cost basis value, the company was required to record an impairment loss and then was not able to record that increase in value at any later date until the Bitcoin was actually disposed of. And so if you were to look at MicroStrategy's balance sheet, for example, and their earnings, you would see pretty sizable impairment losses. And so this was actually not accurately representing the economics of the asset held at that time. And it's not there shouldn't be incentive to sell the asset to actually record and realize that increase in value. So it's not it was not previously accurately reflecting what the economics were and what the true value was. And so now the guidance is, okay, anytime you're holding what this guidance defines as a crypto asset, so this excludes NFTs, I will caveat with that, for any crypto assets held on the balance sheet, recorded at fair value. So as of the date of my, the end of the quarter, I should say, what is the price and what is the quantity of my Bitcoin held? And that is the number that I will record on my balance sheet. Any change in value does go through earnings still, but in an appreciating market or, whatever the price volatility is, the company is, now able to take ownership and accurately represent what the economics are of the assets held. So
Hmm.
it is intended to be a lower cost, lower complexity movement for the industry, which is really exciting because I think it is beneficial to the users of the financial statements and also the team doing the back office work. So this is the type of guidance from my perspective that is actually enabling companies to continue to explore and grow in this space.
Yeah, that's really great. And the fact that it's making it less complex, easier for both sides, as you mentioned. And
Mhm.
I know from the macro, there's a lot of companies looking to do this because of inflation, because of other assets not performing as well. And Bitcoin has been like the top performing asset over the past, I believe, 10 to 11 years. Um,
Uh-huh.
So it seems to be like a global trend of companies adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet. Now, obviously, we're talking just the United States, but for us to remain competitive, it's good that these rules are, making it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even if you think about the guidance from a global perspective, we are now more in line with what is acceptable, in Europe and companies following IFRS guidance. So, this is really exciting for the space. And, you know, not only is it saving companies time, ideally, it's let's say you've never touched crypto, you don't understand it, and you also don't understand accounting specifically. There's a reason that we can go and trade stocks and look at a 10K if we want to understand the financial health of a company without understanding that accounting guidance might not be the most up to date or accurately representing what the activity is. It might signal something that is not necessarily fair, if you will, to the company holding that asset. So this is really encouraging, and I think over time we'll continue to see more and more clarity, hopefully based off of informed input from industry thought leaders. So I think this is all really, really exciting stuff.
I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm curious as to have you seen more companies and corporates coming to you guys about these things, given that Bitcoin and crypto have gone mainstream? You got the ETF launches, you got regulations kind of halfway through the whole legislative process, right? Got out the Fit 21 got out of the House. Are you guys seeing more demand and more business because of these things?
Yeah, I would say there's a new energy in this space right now. And we're even seeing more demand from companies that, have been in this space for a while, and they're coming to us and they're saying, you've been on top of this thought leadership element and educational, coming from an educational lens, I think has gone a long way for us because we've stayed engaged and on top of these new regulations and this new guidance, and we've been building for this for a while, anticipating a lot of these changes because we genuinely we want to enable companies. And so it's been energizing to see companies come to us saying, we've seen your thought leadership, we've seen, this educational content that you're putting out. We want to understand how your solutions work now. And so it is, while we've seen more demand, we're also continuing to have conversations with, large institutions around, okay, we're thinking about these projects. How can we build with you to make sure we're doing this the right way? We want to have the pipes in place before we take off, and that's also been really exciting to see. So
Hmm. Um, a rookie question here. Does it matter if a company adds Bitcoin directly to their balance sheet versus if they buy the ETF? Let's say they buy BlackRock's ETF. And I don't know the intricacies of these things and how it all works, but does that matter?
yeah, so any company holding crypto assets will then record that asset held on their balance sheet. So the simple answer is yes.
Got it. And what's on your roadmap for 2024 or the remainder of 2024?
Yeah, in terms of roadmap, so two things I'll say. One, we are expanding from a global perspective. We're growing into, multiple different areas of the world, specifically Europe, Dubai, Latin America. There's an initiative to expand globally on all fronts. So not just accounting. I did mention, IFRS and GAAP aligning more closely now, but from a tax form perspective, just from a general information reporting perspective, what's happening at TaxBit and the thing that keeps me extremely energized about what the company has built and can build is once this company, TaxBit, from a solution provider perspective, once we have the underlying data and quality of calculations for those gain losses, we can put together any combination of form or report, and we can expand globally from there and also continue to iterate as we see more regulatory clarity. So number one is we're expanding internationally. And number two, what I was alluding to there is as we continue to see clarity, whether it's the FASB for, accounting in the US, or there's changes to the international accounting guidance and that landscape, or there's updated information reporting requirements for this country, we are able to build to those things because we have the underlying calculation engine, and we also we have the infrastructure as a team to continue to build. We raised over $200 million a handful of years ago, and we're in this for the long haul. And as much as we can enable the space with modernized solutions, we'll continue to do that.
Mm. Let's talk about the crypto market at large. We kind of touched on it earlier with the ETF launches, crypto going mainstream. Love to get your thoughts on that. And look, even presidential candidates are now suggesting the United States add Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. It seems we're entering a new era of crypto adoption with politics integrated and much more.
Yeah, we are. I mean, at Bitcoin Nashville alone, and in it to be fair, it was my first time attending that specific conference. I've been to a handful of the other conferences. The political representation blew my mind. And even hearing Michael Saylor speak about his outlook on Bitcoin, not only from a corporate adoption perspective, but from a global adoption perspective for nations in debt. I mean, it is just fascinating to see the intersection here between what, a few years ago might have been for the retail use case, and now you have people speaking, presidential candidates and Michael Saylor speaking about the use cases for nations in debt. I mean, it is truly fascinating. So
Yeah. And then I mean, I don't think people want to see crypto become politicized, but unfortunately, some people in the government have made it that way, and as a result, it seems like it's going to be an election issue. Certainly not number one, for the majority of the nation, but for some people, it's a single issue item for them. Like they're like, "Hey, you're anti-crypto. I'm going to vote against you." And we're starting to see some of that. And what are your thoughts on it becoming this election thing and the industry's raising funds to donate to pro-crypto candidates and so forth?
yeah, I won't comment too much there because I think like any political topic, it can become polarizing. But what I will focus on here is, we are neutral from a political standpoint, and our mission is to build solutions to enable whatever the regulation is, and keep users and institutions informed around what this regulation is and how we can continue to, I again, like I said, any political topic can get noisy. We are focused on enabling companies, individuals, and government agencies with solutions to explore these different emerging technologies.
What are your thoughts on stablecoins and tokenization? The stablecoin market is heating up, and are some of your clients stablecoin issuers, or are some of them looking to use stablecoins? And what are some of like the tax implications and so forth.
Yeah, no, I see stable coins having having a lasting future as it relates to corporate adoption and use case. I mean, if you think about payment processing and international transfers, and a couple of specific examples I'll give here, like Stripe helps merchants to accept stable coins, and PayPal has launched a stable coin. I see this being a lasting use case, and stable coins fall under that same guidance. We one thing I'll say about stable coins specifically is at the surface, it might seem as if, okay, I will record this one to one. I can say this is worth $1 and I don't need to track any price volatility here. That was actually my outlook for stable coins. And then you think of the FTX use case, you still need to track what the actual price is because there is a scenario where that price still does fluctuate. So same guidance applies to stable coins, but we are seeing more and more use cases as it relates to stable coins. And I think stable coins are actually an extremely approachable entry for, people who are not as familiar with the crypto. I think you could categorize the different crypto assets in so many different ways. So my grandma, she might not care about having exposure to Bitcoin and that price volatility or the ETH ETF. I think that I heard this comparison in a podcast I listened to recently where someone said, the Bitcoin ETF is more an investment and a desire for exposure to that price volatility and that actual asset, whereas the ETH ETF is more of exposure to the underlying technology and the blockchain that will continue to build on there. So I think the use cases are different, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, stablecoin, and I think a stablecoin is an extremely approachable way for new users to adopt this underlying technology.
Mm. And on that note, with tokenization, and this might be too early to have this conversation, but you're seeing like BlackRock tokenize a fund on the Ethereum blockchain. Are there like any new tax implications, or maybe once again, we're not there yet. We still have to figure all this
Yeah.
out. You have to get guidance on the IRS and so forth.
No, exactly. I mean, the number of times I've heard the real world assets being tokenized, people want to learn about these new concepts, and I that has been a hot topic that I continue to hear more and more about. And it is an area where we'll continue to need regulatory clarity and guidance. Because if you think about any of these, new concepts, so let's say the tokenization of a real world asset, we need to think about the nuances for reporting and what does the actual accounting look like for that, and those are conversations that we're actively having today. So but at the root of it's all about the underlying transaction data and being able to capture what is the value of this asset when I acquire it, when I sell it, and then any point in time in between. It's the same thing with NFTs. I mean, it's still a challenge in the space for anyone holding NFTs. How do you value what that NFT is worth? There's different solutions out there. You know what the value is when you acquire that NFT. You know what it is when you sell it, but how are you measuring that time in between? And it's the same thing for some of these other emerging concepts.
Question for you, wouldn't the standard, let's say I buy a trading card or a comic book, wouldn't the same rules apply because there is volatility in that market and it's a collectible and I could be holding it for 6 months or 1 month and I flip it or whatever it is, right? Wouldn't something similar apply to, or this, the offline version of that apply to NFTs?
Yeah, and so that's interesting because right now in this updated accounting guidance, NFTs are out of scope for this fair value accounting guidance. So right now, what technically, if you're holding an NFT, you are still required to do impairment on that NFT, which the implications for that are quite challenging for a company. If I buy an NFT, being able to track what was the low after I acquired it, even though I'm still holding it, that's it. Like if you're holding a comic book,
Yeah.
that's virtually it's pretty much impossible to do. And so that is where we should continue to see, and we will continue to see, based off of demand and use cases really playing out in the industry, that guidance will also need to shift because that from an operational perspective, that becomes extremely time consuming. And, you also want accurate reporting. So it's the same thing. I appreciate the analogy there because right now the guidance has NFTs scoped out. So as we see, if and when and how we see more demand for these use cases, I am confident that, the FASB and these other regulating bodies will, find middle ground in terms of what's required. Because at the end of the day, I do believe that there is utility and value in this underlying technology. And we're just scratching the surface with use cases, and paired with these new use cases, and to actually encourage innovation in this space, we will need, regulation and guidance that makes sense and is feasible for people to continue to adopt. So.
Yeah, well said. I got some wrap-up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Oh, that's interesting. If I could create my own metaverse, I'm really passionate about education. I love education, and at some point in my life, I'd love to be a teacher. And so I'd love to see a metaverse for some sort of innovated education environment.
Awesome. And then some rapid fire questions. First is favorite food.
Favorite food? Oh my word. My favorite food is a smoothie.
Favorite musician or band.
Diplo.
Favorite movie.
Legally Blonde.
And favorite book.
Oh, favorite book. I Am Malala.
And when you're not working at TaxBit, what are you doing for fun?
I am in the mountains doing all things skiing, snowboarding, trail running, and I also am a freelance artist.
Mm. Reagan, pleasure chatting with you. Appreciate the insights, and hopefully we get additional clarity from the government, the IRS, and they get it right. Balance regulation and legislation. So, but thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.